Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you as I always do from this, my little nutshell of infinite space right here in the wood of the holly. And every once in a while in a lifetime, serendipity and fate, or whatever you want to call it, kismet comes into play. And that happened to me about 4 years ago on a rooftop in Rome, where I was just had one night in a pension. There was a little bar there. And I stumbled upon a lovely couple, and I thought they were English at first. And I identified myself. I said, I'm from Hollywood. And they kindly offered that they were traveling from the most distant of locales, a place called Tasmania, which is, for those that don't know, it's part of Australia. It's an island off the southern tip of Australia, the capital of which is Hobart. And they mentioned that to me. And the first thought that came into my mind exactly when they said that is, oh my God, I just saw this incredible movie. It's by far the best movie I'd seen in years about this couple from Tasmania that adopted these two Indian boys. And then I'm like explaining the plot like they didn't know. And then they kindly interrupted me and said, that was us. I was like, what? That's you? And certainly, I'm wiping this lens right here. And certainly, John and Sue Brierley, the people that lived this story, were staring me right in the face, just the three of us on a rooftop in Rome. And we became friends, fast friends that night, and then later Facebook friends. And we maintained this connection. In the intervening years, and by the way, you have to see this movie, Lion. It's one of the best movies that's come down the road in many a year, a true story. Sue Brierley, who's with me right here, welcome Sue, was played by Nicole Kidman in the movie. And just right off the bat, I have to say that I thought Nicole's performance was heartfelt and beautiful, and she's a tremendous actress, but she kind of down pretty because Sue Brierley, as I stare at you right now, is still just a stunning woman on so many levels and beautiful in the extreme. And she's here with me now. So welcome all the way from Hobart, Tasmania, Sue Brierley, a true lioness and a recent author of her own memoir called Lioness. Welcome. So great to see you.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to see you again after all these years in the virtual world.
Yes, well, it affords certain kind of conveniences. You know, there was a time where people, were lucky to get a postcard, and that would fill in the dots and the blanks of these long distance relationships. But here we are talking in real time. Now, for me, it's about 7 o'clock in Los Angeles on a Thursday night. And it's, let's see, it's 10 minutes after 2 on Friday in Hobart, Tasmania, and it's a sunny day out there. So I'm excited just to see you. I can't tell you.
Oh, you're very kind.
Yes, well, I'm, I don't know if you ever got the letter I sent you. It was an email some years back after I met you, because as many people know, I've written many screenplays. I've even directed. We have one thing in common is actually we both have movies about our own lives. This is mine. It's called The Solar Opposite. Warner Brothers ultimately released it. I wrote and directed it. And Sue has a movie about her own life and her son's life and her husband's life and Montasha's life. Also, so we have that in common, although my movie has remained obscure and yours was nominated for a whole slew of Oscars, which it deserved to win.
Yes, we're proud of that.
You should be. Now, I want to just talk first about the book. What made you write your own memoir, after this movie came out? What compelled you to write this great book?
Well, it came about solely because my son Saroo asked me. He felt it would be a good follow-on. He felt it would be good for me, although really, I now think back and think I really didn't question him much on that. I just sort of thought, oh, well, okay. So he approached his publisher, which was Penguin, Penguin Random House, and they were very keen on this idea, and we had a meeting and, a bit of discussion there. And then I thought, well, I'll go away and think about this. And so I worked out a proposal of what I could write about, and then sent that through to them and to see if they still were interested. And they said yes. And so I had quite a generous timeline, date ahead that they would like to look at for publication. And so, yeah, I can do that. So I started the process, and it took me 2.5 years to write it. And then a few months longer than that with all the editing.
Right.
I'd done an original first pass of editing through the latter stages of writing on the work I'd completed. And then when it was all done and I'd finished, it went back in-house for Penguin to have their editor work on it.
And
so I wrote a big book, and it was a long time. It was a big chunk of my life. 3 years at my age was really in a lot of ways, a sacrifice, because I was not doing other things while I was doing that. That said, the last year of the process, of course, was the COVID time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was, it was a long time, and it was very hard. And honestly, at times I think now, I don't know if it was such a wise decision.
To write the book?
Yes.
Because, was it painful? I mean, you reviewed...
Yes, it was really, for me, because of the content, and you would understand because you've read it now, Bill, but it was tough, and it brought up a lot of things that I just had deleted from my day-to-day living. And I was quite okay with that. I just got on with my whole life and left all that crap behind. And then when I had to write about it and consider it, and then also research and investigate a lot of things, again, it brought it all back. So it was a tough gig, because at the end of it, I was very exhausted, A, and B, I'm sure I had post-traumatic stress from my past.
Well, I think the act of revisiting it, not unlike what Saroo had to do, is investigate the backwaters of his own memory to find out his own story. In some ways, it feels liberating. And your story begins in Europe with a traumatized family from World War II and refugees, like so many millions, and you end up in this incredibly faraway place. And as you describe it in your book, I mean, your father, it's a tyranny of paternity. It's just the cruelty of, it sounds, as you describe it, the most cruel version of fatherhood that you could imagine. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the book, for me, was such a triumph of your own life and of self-invention and recreating your own family, and through your own will and your own innate sense of just your own possibility. I felt it was like an incredibly beautiful story and a perfect companion piece to the movie. And I was taken, of course, by that first vision that you had as a young girl staring out across the coastal Tasmania about what your future could be. And maybe you could expand on that. And the beautiful little poem that you wrote, the last couplet of which I believe is in your book at the end.
Mm. Well, for me, because my life was a very horrible thing until I was until I left my hometown and my family, that I was really a very broken and timid young girl, and I was not afforded love, affection, and adequate education possibilities, so it was really a very dark place. It became even darker when I realised that not everyone lived like that. And to be honest, that was quite a big shock to me, because when you're living in a dark place on a day-to-day basis. It's all you know from when you're born and your first awareness comes to you. You think it's quite normal. And in a way, that might be a little self-protection trick that goes on with children who are in abusive and traumatic situations. But suddenly I knew that really, hey, this was not good. And for me, there was a period where I just really started to shrivel away. I really felt if I hadn't had a little glow happening, I think I could have just slipped off the planet. I was already very unwell, and I could have just disappeared. I certainly was in the process of doing that emotionally. But I was rescued, if you like, by a fantasy, a vision, a dream, whatever you like to call it. But it came to me when I was at the lowest point. But the benefit of it is that I suddenly had hope. When I woke up the next day from this vision, instead of just saying, oh, how crazy am I? I've gone nuts, and really just casting it off like that. I just thought, no, I've been gifted. I've been blessed. And it just helped me move on because I still had some years of that horrible life to live before I would be free of it. And the other thing was that I looked to my life as those early years being a template of what not to do in one's adult life.
Mm-hmm.
So that made my whole life a whole lot easier. I just knew I would live my life in the exact opposite to what I'd experienced in my family life.
So you just do the photo negative of what your own
That's
experience
right.
was.
I thought, oh, how hard can that be?
Yeah, you got the manual of what not to do, which could be as useful as what to do. Who knew?
Exactly. And really, it's been very interesting, especially in the last years since I launched my book, and I've done, so many interviews and spoken to so many people. And a lot of them have this attitude that trauma would ruin my life, and that it was, not possible for me to turn that into a great way to live. And I must admit, I've always been very nervous when I get interviewed by people who have psychiatric background, like professionally, or social workers or counsellors or whatever involved in that, because they are in the absolute belief that you cannot recover from that you will be damaged and impaired. And, so I'm always a little bit on the back foot when I'm speaking with people like that.
I'm very ignorant in those areas, so I think you're safe.
I'm safe. Cool. So anyway, that was the thing. But then the other thing that came in, of course, with my book is that I did have an opportunity to put those thoughts out there, and that maybe that might be helpful for other people, young women particularly, to say, oh, look, well, she's come through that, I can too.
Yeah.
And so that was another reason I thought, oh, look, I can put my penny's worth, if you like, out there in print. And I agree, it is a good follow on from the film, because when I travelled a lot with Saroo, when we were marketing the film and being interviewed, we'd get asked so often about, why did you do that? Everyone was very keen to know how come this family situation came about. So I recalled those things and thought, well, maybe I should, fill in the gaps with my book.
Well,
so yeah.
You did. As I said earlier, for every lion, there is a lioness, and you have embodied that in the highest, with the highest in the most beautiful way. Now, one of the things in your book was, of course, when you met John. I mean, it seems like it's amazing to me because I've been out there in the single scene my whole life looking for my first or second or third or fourth love. And you just stumbled right into it. The first date, first love, last husband, the whole thing, the first night, amazing to me. So I thought, well, her luck changed in a big way very quickly. And I just thought that was a very beautiful part of the story. And it just seemed like you were like a flower ready to bloom.
I was certainly ready. And also, I think I was very, because I was so decisive about what I needed and saw my future being, I really saw it very quickly when it was there. I didn't muck around. I thought, great, this is right in front of my eyes. And so here we are, and we've just had our 50th wedding anniversary,
Oh,
which is quite considerable these days.
yeah.
And that also has been a blessing for me too, along with the fact that sadly through our 50 years together, a lot of our friends and relationships for them haven't lasted. And so I've seen that sadness. So I think in a lot of ways people can be too tough on each other, too demanding, and not really realistic enough about humans and how individual we are, especially in a close relationship.
Well, and then of course, time goes by and you guys start building a life. And it's seemingly, I even saw the Brierley website with the industrial products and the sailing and the hoses and the fittings and the whole thing. And then at some point, that vision that you had as a young girl, you started to take some steps to make that a reality, which, according to your book, and you had to navigate a very difficult sort of bureaucracy associated with international adoption, and sounds very challenging. That part of the movie is not there, it's just the kids show up at the airport, but it's a big part of
Yes.
your story.
Well, I guess the thing is for the script writer and the screenplay of a movie, it's all about what to put in and how can you convey the story in the simplest of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a fairly challenging movie to make, of course, because, the topic was so difficult. And, how to decide what to do. But in the end, it is a good way to tell our story, I feel, because if it had gone off in a tangent and tried to sort of elaborate on my story, John's story, the rest of it, I just think it could have ended up being so confusing and such a quagmire of emotion and trauma that it's okay. The film here in Australia is in the top 5 movies ever. So it's chasing hot on the tail of Crocodile Dundee, of which all you guys know about, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And of course, that's pretty amazing for this family story.
Well, it's a great movie. I mean, I've written 10 screenplays. I've been fortunate enough to direct and make one. And just watching it again, first of all, the performance of young Saroo and his brother
Yes,
Gudu is spectacular. Garth
yes.
Davis's capacity to make Indian, first the village where Kamala is from and where they're originally raised, is you believe it. And then this emerging industrial giant megalopolis that India is becoming in the latter half of the 20th century, and for a 5-year-old to be lost in this maze. I mean, all of making that vivid and real, and the sounds and the terror and the sexual predation and the trauma that this boy, I mean, he's like God is just hovering over him, just protecting him. And I suspect that that's true. I mean, I suspect that it felt very real, but it's just from a movie, it's fantastic. It ranks with some of my favorite Australian movies, or just any movie. But I think of like movies like Gallipoli and,
Yes.
and the Peter Weir movies in particular.
I'm a fan too of those. I think it's because you really feel you've been dropped into that spot, that you're standing there and this is happening in front of your eyes. You become so immersed in it. And
Mhm.
I think that was part of the shock that John and I had in Saroo when we watched it for the first time, because it was just so believable.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a true story, but it was just so, it made you feel you were truly there.
Yeah, I felt that the movie was an absolutely brilliant meditation on trauma and memory, and putting to pieces together and suffering through the trauma and how it vibrated through your family. And that's why I felt your book too is an exercise in really the triumph over trauma and memory. And
Yeah.
so in both ways, I felt like the book and the movie were complementary. And it made me think, well, maybe Sue and John will adopt me, and then my movies will get made, and I could save you the hassle because I know where my parents live. I have their address. I have their email address. I could drive there in 10 minutes if you adopt me. You don't have any of the same hassle. I'm not there on Google Earth with bins on the wall going crazy. No, I just go, well, my dad lives in West Hollywood. It's easy. So
Yeah. It's just a totally different experience, different human experience. But I think these, at the moment in our world, I don't think it hurts to have another perspective, because it makes you think of your own experience a little bit differently. The comparison is so stark, and maybe you could sort of think, well, things are rather good. Look at what happened to that kid,
yeah.
and look what happened to that girl, and look what happened to my mother as a refugee. You know, all of these things do make you think differently about your day.
Yeah, absolutely. My
That's
mother was born in Berlin, and as a 4-year-old, Saroo's age, she was shuttled out of Germany, with the Nazis not far behind. Fortunately, she came with her family, but we're all here through all these calamitous, you know, our calamitous 20th century has shuffled the deck and put us in places that we could never even imagine. You're part of that history.
I found it quite interesting speaking to people, and when I was writing, about how in the end do people feel about being somewhere else other than where their family was born and they come from. And in a way, I think generally in a perfect world, people would love to live and die where they're born without fear, wars, pandemics, or whatever. Because, my mother particularly, as she aged, felt she would wish to die where she was born. Her fond childhood memories, even though she had a very hard life, she just felt it was more natural to stay where you begin. And, I guess with this pandemic that we've all had to endure now, we're all thinking, maybe all this shuffling around the planet, the world is our oyster kind of thinking, isn't always the very best way to live one's life, and certainly not always the best place to end it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate. I grew up in LA. I wasn't born here, but my family's here. Um, my dad doesn't live too far away. My mother's the same. My brothers. I just feel like the continuity of that is really healthy. It's hard in the United States, an incredibly mobile society where just too much of a premium on individuality and inventing your own life. And I think there's a price to that. And you're experiencing it too. You mentioned Saroo is married now. You're a grandmother, and he is living in España, Madrid. Is that right?
Yes. So it's a long way away. And of course, I haven't met my grandson. He's now 7 months old. And I haven't, I really don't know how it will be when I meet my own son, because now he is a father and he will be different. So when we finally meet again, I will be meeting a person I haven't known before. And I'm very mindful of, the place you're in or at in your life changes you, and you become someone a little bit different to what you were before. So, I don't know how I'm going to react to that. And no matter how much Zooming and FaceTiming you do, it's not the same as, being in the same room with someone.
Of course. But you might be happily surprised, because there's also growth, and all the seeds that you planted, you can see hopefully come to a new kind of fruition. Now, in the movie, he's studying like hotel or tourist management. Is that his world to this day?
No, we see his world now, and has been since he wrote his book, actually, and this is before the film. He's done a lot of keynote speaking events. And that was the reason he met his partner now. He met her in Mallorca, doing a keynote speaking event for a company over there. So he'd been flitting around doing this, and this was how he was earning his living. He really has an amazing story to sell, and a lot of businesses like to have him as a speaker at their conferences and so forth. Of course, of late, a lot of those are virtual, but they are coming back to face. So that was how he was earning his living. The downside of that for us, of course, is that took him away out of our life frequently, even though until recently he was using our home as his base where he was living and then travelling. But now he's sort of very far away, and our whole life has changed, because now we've got this big business, but the son and heir has gone to Spain, and we're thinking, and John's getting older. And for us as a couple, it has changed things immensely from the sort of family plan that we had. It is now not the plan. And we have to really relearn and rejig how to live this last part of our lives with someone so far away. Yeah. I don't know that we'll ever get to the incessant travelling back and forth that we did before. And, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing either.
Movies end, but lives go on, and then there's no freeze frame at the end of our life if we keep living. So
that's right.
Now, a couple questions I have, because I'm a writer and an actor, and is, what kind of input or relationship were you able to have with Nicole, and how, did she use you as a resource in terms of understanding the part that she played? I thought she did quite a nice job.
Yes. Well, the process really was faultless for me, because from the beginning, I'd said, I want her to play me. As soon as the offer of the film was there and we knew it was going to happen and the screenplay was there, and I just said straight out, well, I want Nicole Kidman to play me. Of course, everyone laughed and said, as if, I thought, oh, come on. Anyway, as it turned out, she did see the screenplay at Cannes Film Festival. And I didn't know a thing about that then, but a lot of projects get tabled there. The actors and filmmakers, they sort of look at what's on the go and what's coming up and so forth. And she expressed interest in this role at the Cannes Film Festival. She was there for the launch of Princess of Monaco, I think was the film she was feature in there. Anyway, as it turned out, it happened. She got the role. So from then on, she had a process of trying to figure out how, well, now I've got it, I've got to figure out how to do it. So the first part of that was she sent her colleague and business partner, really, pair to Tassie, asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed by him and recorded and so forth. So she could get a feel for how I speak, look, act, get the back end of the story. So Pear came to Tassie and we had a lovely few days, and it was a bit sort of strange for me, but then I thought, oh, look, you know, I've just got to oblige. And I was quite happy because I wanted to make sure the outcome was the best it could be. And then after that, I had a meeting with Nicole when she was in Sydney for the launch of another thing, Paddington Bear. So we got together at her apartment and spent an afternoon together. And it was amazing how similar we were in a lot of ways, in a lot of thinking particularly, because she has 2 adopted children.
Mm-hmm.
They're adult now. And, you know, so she really sort of got me. And we connected, and she's a very affectionate kind of person. You know, when you're with her, she just sort of puts her arm on your shoulder and you're sort of in the clamp position and you've got to walk if she does. And it was just, you know, we really were very connected at that time. And we have the odd communication now and then. And that's fine. You know, life goes on. But in the end, I think the role was quite traumatic for her in a lot of ways. And I think that was evidenced when we were in New York for the world premiere. And, you know, as proud as she was, you could see this was a film that had cost her a bit. And, you know, and that was when we came off the stage after the film and we walked out through the side, and Keith just was standing there and he said, oh, babe, I didn't know that was such a hard role for you. You know, because we don't know how actors feel about the people they're playing. You know, that they often have to have terrible roles and say and do terrible things. But it has an effect. And I just trust that, you know, karmic cleansing has taken place and she's got rid of my spirit out of her body and she's moved on. I know that.
Well, if I was, I would want to hold on to your spirit, because your spirit is pure and beautiful. Like, I think, you know, I think you gifted her, you gifted her something that was precious. Any actress or actor, what they're looking for are great parts, and you gave. That's it. I don't care if you're the biggest movie star on earth, and she is, or you're somebody who's scrambling in obscurity like me. The greatest gift is the great part, and you gave her that. And, you know, she doesn't even show up in the movie till the first 50 minutes, you know, really tracks all the story just to get Saroo to Tasmania. And then, you know, she comes into the story. But like you said, I felt like you believed, especially now having read your memoir and watching some of the scenes with her, that I felt that she had internalized your past, your dream, and this vision she had of how she could, in her own small way, make the world a better place, be the change you seek, like Gandhi, you know, said. And I felt like she did that, you know.
Certainly did. And I know there were, you know, she did a lot more scenes that ended up on the floor that didn't stay in the end results. You know, that I was a bit sad about, because, you know, what we saw, we knew that there was a lot of her work not kept in the movie.
I can sense that. All
that
the domestic challenges of raising 2 boys, I imagine, there was more that was filmed than was ever seen. Now,
Yes.
there's a couple things, there's some questions I have. First of all, the young Saroo has this incredibly, it's as performed by the young actor, the most incredible disposition, an incredible adaptive, personality, and incredibly charming. And it's just like the angels are just over his shoulder, even in the worst of moments. And was that accurate?
Yes. Well, I think it was because, he really just totally accepted what happened and, in a way, moved on like I did. But he wasn't bitter about it.
Mm-hmm.
You never saw any anger or, he just really cruised along. And that is a gift. I really feel, for me as a mother, looking in and watching how he was as a little lad, and then say how my other son, Mantosh, was. You know, he was looked after through and through, but I think by nature he is a lot more laid back. Other than that, of course, he was not abused like Mantosh was.
Yes.
So, for Saroo, yes, it got tough there for a bit, but he could see, oh, look, other kids are getting through this and so forth. Or he had a little sixth sense that thought, oh, geez, I better get out of here. This isn't good.
Mm-hmm.
I think those sorts of things might be inherited traits of personality, that
Yeah.
he already had those within him from birth because of the character of his mother and father.
Now, yeah, I felt like some people in life, I deal with this myself, they take the blows of life head on, and others
Yeah.
have a way of letting them kind of glance off of you and just keep going. And you don't take all those beatings head on. There's a certain
No, that's
sort
right.
of, you see that amongst athletes, they don't
Yes.
take those collisions, head on. They know how
Yeah.
to glance them.
What sometimes we say that someone can be jammy and, that they just sort of cruise on through and the problems just seem to, flick off and off you go. And I think Saroo has been a bit like that. Anyway, I guess, he's got a lot of life left, I hope. Whether this good fortune continues remains to be seen.
The one story you told me on the rooftop that I'll never forget, and then it's echoed in your book, was at the Oscars when you guys, it didn't win Best Picture, which, believe me, I believe it should have. There's no doubt in my mind. La La Land and Moonlight, I don't want to disparage those movies, but they in no way compare to the cinematic achievement that was Lion. But that he was so distraught for losing, meaning not winning the Best Picture, that he couldn't go to the Vanity Fair party. And all I could do was laugh, because I have spent my whole life not only trying to get to an Oscar, just to get another movie made. And this kid was born into abject poverty in the freaking backwaters of India, through a sequence of incident and tragedy. He is adopted into the most beautiful home with some of the best surf spots on earth down in Tasmania, with the family and a dad who's a surfer. Holy cow, he's got sailboats and toys in the ocean. And he figures out through Google Earth and the divine inspiration where his mother lives. He writes a story about it. They make a movie. It becomes an international hit. He's a celebrity. And he's upset that he lost. Like, come on, wait. I live 10 minutes walking from where those Oscars were, and I still have not been in that building. Okay. If I ever get nominated, I can walk. And this guy couldn't, wait a minute, let's get some priorities figured out right here. To me, that's like the funniest story I ever heard.
Really, the catch for him is that because it just has been this constant circle of success, and then all of a sudden there's a little chink, and oh, what, did that really just happen?
Yeah.
And you know, because there were so many factors in there, you know, like the politics of the movie world is really, you know, just like real life politics. It's got so many dimensions and factors and so forth. And of course, we're an Australian film, you know, but that said, we scooped the pool with Lion in all of the Australian Industry Awards.
Oh, for sure.
So the following year, of course, Lion won just about, I think it won nearly every category.
And deservedly so. I mean, it
And
is.
so to me, in a way, that kind of honour on home ground is very valuable.
Oh, for
The
sure.
worldwide movie industry, of course, it's the American industry that's the, you know, the icing on the cake. But in reality, you know, I'm okay with where that went. We bought a plastic Oscar on the way home from at the airport and thought, oh, well, you know,
That's
it
enough.
is what it is.
I liked the thing that I made a note about it too was like this in your whole life that perhaps the most traumatic event in your whole life was maybe not even your youth, but that you didn't have a dress to wear for the Oscars. Now that to me sounds like terror indeed of the highest order, and yet you managed to resolve that in excellent fashion.
I pulled it off. We had to just do that by the seat of our pants because we weren't invited. We we didn't have a ticket, you know,
Oh,
you had to
really?
be invited.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And that didn't happen until about 10 days before.
Oh my God.
So, you know, until then we weren't considering that we would be going.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue, a few cords were pulled and favours called in, and then suddenly the Brierley family were going to the Oscars
Wow. How
right at the
exciting.
last minute.
That must.
So it was a very surreal experience, and you know, I'm glad we went,
Oh,
and
yeah.
also I appreciated how we were treated there, because that said, even though we didn't win anything, everyone you spoke to said, oh, that film, we love that film. So from then on, everyone was acknowledging this film, even though for whatever reason we didn't get the votes. But everyone you spoke to loved it.
It was
You
by
know,
far the best movie of the year and of many years. It's a huge triumph. It operates on so many levels. It's a domestic family. It's an incredible adventure story. It has some very interesting psychological dimensions about, like I said, memory and trauma and putting that together. And in the end, it's such an affirming story about, yes, there is a divine sort of power that maybe is looking after us. You know, I have a few basic questions. Is what ever happened to Saroo's mother, Kamala, who is now, or she's not the vice president of the United States. I know that, even though they share the same name.
well, she's okay. So Saroo actually bought that little house, for the want of a better word.
mhm.
It's been reconstructed because she did not want to move from there, because that's her community. And so that's where she is and living there still. And you have to respect that, because just because he had the money or the means to, you know, pluck her out of that slum village and pop her somewhere else doesn't mean that she would do that. And
Right.
so she didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay in her community. And so that's where she is, in amongst her friends. Of course, she doesn't work as she did because,
Wow.
you know, she's older now too, and she isn't in fantastic health.
And she gave
But she
you a
doesn't
great,
have, pardon? She
I'm
doesn't
sorry,
have
go
to
ahead.
worry. So she's okay and she's content. She does still, of course, have her son and daughter living not that far away. So you've
Mhm.
got to respect that as well. So I often get that question, you know, what did Saroo do about his first mother? Like she's just a package to pick up and, oh, is she going to come and live with you in Australia? Why isn't she living with you? And all these sort of funny ideas. But at the end of the day, she's an adult woman. You can't just, boss her around and tell her what to do.
Well, watching the movie, especially the end, and also you're in the movie and in the credits, your own reunion
Yes.
after his first reunion. One of the most incredible moments of the movie is when the village, this community, just surrounds Saroo and Kamala, and they're just applauding. And just the beauty of that community, despite its, by our standards, incredible poverty, like, why would you leave that?
Yes. You see, we can just say, if you're poor, it's a bad life. But that's not the fact of it. And in a lot of ways, you can be poor and have a good life. You can be very connected to your community and your siblings.
Yeah, I felt that.
Family.
Yeah.
And so, it's just too easy for us to say, I mean, it's all very well, I'm sitting here, and this is a fabulous life that I've got. But I mean, I probably wouldn't cope too well being plucked out of here and dropped into a castle or something different from this.
Yeah.
It's, and there's no need for that. I find that's very arrogant, that kind of thinking.
Right.
Anyway, so he can look after her now, and I'm good with that.
Right.
I'm
And
proud
of
that
course,
he does that.
one of the most transcendental moments of your book is when you describe when you met her and her just giving you or bequeathing you. I mean, it's just like
it was just the way it went. I could not have imagined that it would turn out that way in a fit. I just, as I walked along, and it was only a few steps because we couldn't drive right into the area, and just sort of looking at her ahead and Saroo pointing her out, and I'm seeing her there. And, I guess in a way I was quite naive in my thinking about how that would play out. Anyway, there I was in this sort of almost hum of energy, really. And, my hearing wasn't really functioning. I just don't really remember words much. It was just us there and these voices. And then, of course, I just sadly, it just hit me what her loss was, because just holding her, she was very thin. She was very small. I'm, middle height, but she was tiny, like a little skeleton within this sari. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just pretty, it was a bit of a sledgehammer moment. And so I really sort of became undone and was crying and so forth. And we couldn't speak a single word that each other understood. It's sad to say, she knew no English and I knew no Hindi. But we had a translator there standing nearby. And she was sort of trying to translate what Kamala was saying, and, it just wasn't helping me much. I was getting overcome quite badly. And I'm not really proud of that either, because I feel a bit, what was I crying about, for God's sake? Anyway, she felt that I was fearful of losing Saroo. And she took it into her mind that I was frightened that he would stay there. And there was suddenly the talking's going a lot faster and a little bit louder, and the interpreter was sort of talking more, and I'm thinking, now what's going on? And then the next thing, she's trying to stop me from crying. And then the interpreter said, don't cry. She's telling you, don't cry. I give you my son. He is your son now.
Wow.
Well, that sort of seeped into me, and oh, sadly, it made it worse. I was really crying. It was so sad. And in a way, in the movie, I wish that my words and her words could have been subtitled on that part, as a lot of the earlier part of the film was,
Mm-hmm.
because I still feel now it does look a bit like what she's talking about, really. But it was such a powerful moment. It probably was one of the most powerful experiences in my life, really.
Well, it's powerful to watch. I mean, it's just powerful on so many levels. Maybe, if the words aren't exactly clear, but the sentiment and the emotion is.
Yes.
It's powerful. And there was another thing in your book, and it's sort of, I think, hinted at in the movie, but the exquisitely considerate and sensitivity of Saroo to give you the assurance that even though he was pursuing his origins and his mother or whatever that is, that he wasn't going to leave you, that your
Yes.
relationship was safe. And to me, that also was, I think there was some element of that in the movie, but it was very explicit in your book, and it was very powerful, in the reading.
Yes. Well, for me, that situation was very challenging because the way I interpreted his secret search was that he was not proud of it, that
Mm-hmm.
he felt it would hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a worry, and that also that he could have been manipulated by society to feel that he had to do that because, of course, you've got to try and find your family. So there were all these factors that came into it because of the way our society views adoption, whether it's local or intercountry. A lot of adoption is very secret. So of late, I've sort of, had a bit of interaction with an organisation called Adopt Change, which was started in the US. And, I just think people have got to look at adoption as something generally for the best, that it's a choice, that it's not a second best situation. And especially because I don't want children to ever think that they're second best. I really feel for the little ones who, just a lot of adopted people do not come to terms with the fact that they're adopted. There's no easy way to sort of just say, oh, it's all okay, because for many it is not. And I really feel quite strongly about that. But our society does have a little way to go in that regard. And, I don't change my view on that. I sort of really, my big dream, my global dream is that women all over the world would look after their sisters' children when they can't. So that now, of course, with all this wars and so forth, there's hundreds of thousands of children unaccompanied around the world. And a lot of them are abandoned in camps, sometimes with their mother, sometimes unaccompanied. And I just like women to say, hey, I'm here, I can help, I
Mm-hmm.
want to help. Instead of being so fully ego driven to reproduce, I just
Right.
think that all of those children are there, and even more so now with this horrible Afghani situation.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the ideal refugee candidate is a child,
Right.
ahead of any adult. I think all those children unaccompanied, particularly, I think they're the refugees of our world that we could step up more and help more
Well,
if we wanted to,
you
I think.
did, and your story was amplified across the world. I mean, I mean, just the journey of you alone as a 12-year-old writing that poem. I have the words here on my computer, and then it coming true. I mean, it's so powerful, the whole thing. Your life story is
I
just
just,
beautiful, you know.
I'm happy to hear you say that. And I think as long as people learn from it, especially now that it took a lot for me to give up my words. And as you can see in my story, a lot of it was so secret. Most people would not have had a clue. They got a shock to read about my story. Some of the communications I've had since my book coming out have, they've been so heartfelt from all over the world, really. These people that, oh my goodness, you are amazing, so get just lovely comments, and I'm proud of that.
You should be. Now, how is, of course, the story skews so heavily towards Saroo, but there's another young person in your household, Montosh, and I'm hopeful that there's a happy, sustainable outcome for him. I mean, his story, we didn't get to see it. I don't think he had the same good fortune as an orphan that Saroo had, but I'm hopeful that his life
We
is.
saw in the movie, no, and he certainly didn't have the same gifted potential because of what had happened to him. And in certain cases, there is no cure. So he's a great guy. He works in our business with his dad. So that's great. He's got a lovely partner of 4 years.
Oh, good.
And so, he's pushing along quite well. I mean, obviously, he's still got a few health issues there, but they're treatable and manageable. And overall, he is actually a very kind, caring, sensitive person those parts of Mantosh I'm very proud of, because if you're down and out or sad, he's the first one to come and give you a hug. And I'm very proud of that because, a lot of people just sort of wrote him off as less than an animal. And,
Really?
I think you don't know him. And he's very private. He did find the whole film thing very challenging. He didn't like a lot of the ways he was portrayed in the film. But in reality, it was probably as kindly shown as it could be. And I didn't want him to not be there because he does exist. He is part of this family and he did struggle.
Right.
So it would have been very wrong if he was just deleted.
No, he's part of that story because ultimately, what you see these narrow escapes that Saroo had in India. And when Mantosh comes, you believe that he didn't have the same good fortune. You felt, and then now reading your book, his origins are clearer in terms of they seem to have a better record of how he ended up at the orphanage with his mother and family. And in that story, I suspect he never connected with his birth parents.
No. And that the tragedy of that is that we could have achieved that, but as I wrote about, the theft of his documents by the investigators, the adoption investigators. So there were things in those reports that had better detail of names. But we've talked about this and he says, no, I like my life now. I don't need to know about that.
Right.
And so I'm not going to say to him, well, you should, haven't you got any curiosity, blah, blah. It's his decision to say yes. So he knows enough. He certainly remembers more than enough. And he's sticking with the life he's got now, because
Well, yeah,
as he says, it really wouldn't change anything now.
right. Well, I remember when I first met you guys, or last met you and saw you in Rome, that you guys had, I could feel that the weight of, you know, his difficulties was upon you. And just talking to you now, I get the feeling that things are better.
Yes, definitely. So as long as he's happy, I'm happy. And
That's a
that's
good,
all I could wish for.
that's a,
And he's, you know, productive. He feels okay with his life, and I think that's perfect. I'm quite content with that. The pair of them are animal lovers. They've got a veritable menagerie at their place, and I think, you know, they're living the life they want.
I love these words that you
So
wrote. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm pleased that he's content.
Oh, well, that's enough. I love these words that you wrote when you were just Suzanne Stelnicki in,
Yes.
as a 12-year-old in 1966. My sisters in motherhood cried, please help me. This is meant to be. Then send my heart a message. Her child is now with me.
I had to really push to get that into my book. But it is sort of my truth and the origins of my truth. And yeah, so there they are forever now.
Well, I, you know, if I was to make an alternative, like beginning to this movie, Lion, which I think they did a brilliant job, I could imagine a young Suzanne Stelnicki on a hillside looking out across the bay and thinking those thoughts and embracing that dream. And that would have been a perfectly cool way to begin this story. But I just think it's so beautiful, and I want to encourage anybody and everybody, first see the movie and then read Suzanne Brierley's lovely, heartfelt memoir. You know, it's very impressive because it's very well written. It's a easy, I don't want to say easy read. It's a beautiful read. And who knew that all that time in the pharmacy as a young worker in pharmacies that there was this incredible literary talent lurking there. Who knew?
Oh, you know, they say everyone has a book in them.
Yeah.
So there it is. There's my book, and you know, I've got it sitting here with me now. I went and got it from the other room, and
Oh, good. Show the picture, and I want to show this. Wait, because I got it too. Here, wait. You show it, and I show it. I have it on my iPad. There we go, folks. You got to read Sue Brierley's Lioness. She is, and with her is Saroo the lion. And how is John?
He's good. He's working still, of course. You know, he should be retired, but anyway, not with these changes that have happened. But anyway, so he's working away. But at the end of the day, he's very committed and remarkably energetic man. For him, he's sailing again. The sailing season has commenced.
Okay, it's your summer now. Yeah, you're into
that.
Yeah.
And so in the summer, he might, you know, get one of his surfboards out and head out as well. Although he has made investigations into some sort of propeller that you can put on your surfboard skeg.
Oh, I've seen those. Yeah.
I don't know where that's going to go, but it might help him sort of keep in the water a bit longer.
Well, I would love to go. I want to go to Tasmania, and I would love to go surfing with you guys. But I won't go to Shipstern's Bluff, which I hear is one of the biggest insane waves on earth. I will not go there. I can just tell you.
So John and one of his mates went in there to watch. They had a campaign happening on there, so they watched a bit of surfing there. But they both agreed that no, we won't be doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is extreme surfing.
Yeah.
you've got to be very young and strong and capable to surf ship sterns.
I've seen the videos. I don't want any part of it, but I'm sure there's more gentle exposures on the, I guess, the southern reaches of Tasmania for surf.
Yeah. And our east coast. It is a beautiful place to live. And of course, in our highlands, you know, as you mentioned earlier, we just last year had the World Fly Fishing Championships here because we've got beautiful lakes, and
Rivers.
so it's a magic island home.
Wow. And look at you. Now, your parents were born in Europe, but you were born in Tasmania. Is that correct?
In the north of the state.
Right, right. But I think I have many friends. My mother, like I said, was born in Berlin. Some of my best friends, my closest friend, his parents were both Holocaust survivors, one of whom was in the concentration camp. And he was born here in the United States. But I don't think, that's still part of you, the immigrant, the son of.
I truly believe that our energy has a history that comes to light when you hear things or stories about where your forebears came from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do take it quite to heart when I see any footage or film of the area my parents came from. It seems to really sort of touch me very closely, whether it's a psychological thing. But, I saw an interesting documentary, if you like, with a guy who was talking about to go back to the village after the war. They'd been in Germany then.
Yeah.
But the family said, no, you can't go back there because the village is now taken over by the Russians, and it's now actually part of Ukraine. The borders all got changed at that time.
Right.
And so it turned out that some of their friends that went back to go back to their homes after the war were shot dead in the streets.
Oh.
In my mother's village. And then years later, this thing came on the telly, and I'm watching this documentary, and this guy's talking about this very place. And I'm thinking, wow, my mother could have done that. She might have gone back with the remnants of her family, and they would have been shot like that too. Yeah. And so you do have this feeling that of pain almost, that of fear that could have happened. It was just, it's like you're having a little mini nightmare, because that reality, in fact, what could have been your own, could have been my very own mother's.
I had the opportunity to go back to Berlin, where my mom left as a 5-year-old with her, I don't know, about almost 10 years ago. And my mom had no nostalgia for Germany, really. I thought it was interesting on many levels, but she's an all-American girl. She still is, It's
good to be thankful for your life, for your new life. And, that said, I am a great believer in new life, and I talk about that in my book also. And I think it's very apt that both of my boys came from a home in Calcutta called Navajaban, which means new life.
Right. Is that still working? Are they still?
Yes.
Is there a place where people can make donations, or?
They can find that online, and the details are in Saroo's books and mine.
Okay.
And even though it's a small organisation, it's been going for a very long time, and I'm very thankful. Obviously, that we were fortunate enough to find our children there. In India now, of course, they're in real trouble because there are so many children that are just COVID orphans now.
Oh my God, of course.
It's just, the tragedy of numbers is, just doesn't, I try not to, got to really put it aside, because No, obviously now I can't do any more about that. I mean, apart from my financially contributing, but I really feel for those kids.
Is there much internal adoption in India with
It
Indian
is
kids with Indian families?
that is improving. It used to be a cultural no-no, of course, because they're very big in the blood connection and so forth. And certainly, decades ago, there was the issue of the female child. So it's always been rather prickly, but now people are more educated and more willing to accept another child. They've certainly stepped up as far as family adoptions go, so that if someone in the family has a child or passes away or whatever, there's a lot of inter-family adoption.
I see. Well, that's
But
hopeful.
sadly, inter-country adoption globally has got a very checkered history, and I really don't know that we'll ever see it rise to the heights of people of my generation were really into this thought and belief.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't such a weird thing to do, to want to adopt a child from somewhere else that was in need back then. Now people are not keen on the idea. And so where once we would have had, something like about 800 children come in from overseas into Australia, now it's virtually zero, a handful each year, if that, and generally a family reunion adoption. So apart from that, of course, in Australia, we have poverty and dysfunctional families as well, and we have thousands of children in foster care, and I'm sure it's the same in the US as well.
Oh, yeah.
But we're seeing signs of the possibility of permanent adoptions being made available within our foster care system, because we're recognising that children need permanency. And that, I think, is a hopeful thing, so that in one of the largest state, in the last year, we had something like about 250 odd adoptions that were adoptions made where the children had been in foster care with that family for some time already.
Okay.
And I think that's fabulous. At least that gives these children permanency. And this endless fostering cycle, to me, is nothing that I'm proud of as an Australian. And I write about that also. I really severely dislike parking kids with other families because their own parents aren't able to look after them ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that somewhere along the line we have to say, look, just let these kids have a new life.
Those are each one as a tough judgment call depending on the situation. It requires a lot of oversight and counseling, and I mean,
it's a very tricky thing, but I don't know that I can't imagine that when a child grows up endlessly moving through foster families, pops out at the other end and says, oh, I'm really glad I had 20, casual families on the way.
Yeah.
And for me, you see, I've always admitted my parents were pretty well crap while I was growing up. And I'm sure there's other kids that would say the same. Oh, I wish I could have a new family, a better one that was capable, that wasn't broken in all the various ways that there can be, whether it's, drugs or illness or whatever.
Right.
I just think really that's just so sad, so very sad.
Well, your life is a triumph of self-invention and reinvention and relying on your own intuition and conscience, and you're just the good fortune of your marriage and your life and paying it forward with two boys that who knows what their fates would have been without your intervention. So if there's anything that I can give to you is some sense of you're richer for, Saroo's experience, and you're a little sadder now for his loss, but I have a feeling you'll be seeing and spending time with him in the future. And I don't believe he is lost to you at all. I can't imagine that. And if Saroo wants to do my podcast, I'd love to have him.
Okay.
And what's that?
I will let him know.
I appreciate that. I'm a huge fan. And I just want to thank you for your time and just sharing with me. I want to recommend the book, especially the book. Many have seen the movie, but it's a beautiful companion piece to the movie, and it's its own story, and it's just all beautiful. And the same feeling I had on that rooftop in Rome, talking to you and John, I have now talking to you. So I just so glad first that you watched my little jazz show and reached out to me. And then I said, I got to read this book, and I read it, and that we've had this reconnection on my little podcast. So I just want to thank you.
It's worked out fine. And I'm glad also that I'm, I've always found it quite easy to speak to people one-on-one or whatever. And so I quite enjoy that, because I am proud of my life and story.
Absolutely.
So now, of course, my book started out just here in Australia, New Zealand, Holland, 2 months ago in the UK, and then next February it's going to be in the US.
Well, I downloaded it on Apple Books.
Yes.
And I gifted it to a friend of mine. So I bought 2 copies.
Excellent. I'm pleased to hear it.
So maybe I'm the beachhead in the United States. So if you come back to LA, I hope I get a chance to see you, and I'm going to make an effort someday. I would love to go to Australia, and then
we'll be happy to see you again here after seeing you in Rome.
And now on Zoom.
Did that thing. We were actually traveling with other friends, but they like to have a little rest at that time of the day, whereas we just thought, oh, let's go up to wherever we're staying and have a drink. And you always meet interesting travelers.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was fun.
Yeah, so it was a very organic and natural kind of meeting. And so I just think they're the things that make up the whole picture of one's life, all those stories and connections.
Yeah, for me, it was mind-blowing, because I was enthralled by the movie. And when you guys said, yeah, that was us, I went, you probably have that experience all the time. But then, like, I make movies, I write screenplays. My whole life is like trying to get other stories told and made. And so that's why I said, please adopt me. Maybe my next movie will get made. And I know where my parents live. Sue Brierley, I just want to thank you again. You're so lovely. Nicole Kidman is one of the great beauties of all time, but even that, she can't do you justice in real life. So,
oh dear, well, don't say that too loudly.
Well, don't tell her, I don't care. But I just want to thank you again for this. And you can stay on for a second. I will terminate this recording, but first I want to thank everybody for joining me with the beautiful Lioness herself, Sue Brierley, all the way from Hobart, Tasmania, across the Grand Pacific Ocean, down there at the bottom of the planet. She's here with me on A Rebel Without Applause. Thank you, Sue Brierley, for this conversation. I so appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you to all who watch and listen.
Yes. So,
and I hope you are benefited in some little way by listening to my words and, of course, to Bill's words.
Oh, yeah. And catch the book, see the movie. Till next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that, I mean nama shaloha. I am ending this recording, but staying with you.